Hey, yo, shout out to y'all this morning. Man, we adding more pages to our composium, our compendium, if you will. Today, we going into the Jezebel spirit. All right, so, man, we just gonna go into it. So I ask it, look, hey, image. Hey, co-pilot, I say, can you please explain what a Jezebel spirit is and how are they associated in men and women? How does having a Jezebel spirit affect the human body physiologically and metaphysically? What planetary archon is the Jezebel spirit associated with? All right, so that's going to be a next page in the composium is archons. So that's neither here nor there. We're going to get into that when we get into that, but we're going to get into that. What top three, you know the drill, universal laws can be used to defeat / vanquish the Jezebel spirit? All right, so we're going to roll it. Mug say this is a rich question. You're tapping into a concept that sits at the crossroads of mythology, psychology, hermeticism, and spiritual warfare. I'll walk you through it in a way that honors the symbolic depth without slipping into fear-based interpretations. Yo, I like that. No, I like that. Let's keep it physiological with metaphysical at the same time. What a Jezebel spirit actually refers to in esoteric and symbolic traditions is not literally an entity. It's a pattern of consciousness, a distorted archetype. Distorted meaning infernal, as we've learned from prior lessons of correspondence, or a frequency of manipulation, seduction, and egoic domination. It originates from a biblical narrative, but in metaphysical circles, it evolved into a shadow archetype representing control through emotional influence, distortion of desire, fragmentation of personal sovereignty. That's deep. Fragmentation of personal sovereignty. So you engage in that act so much that it even takes away your ability to pretty much control you, yourself, and your actions. Disconnection from intuition. Addiction to validation or power. It is not gendered. It is a frequency, not a female demon. How it manifests in men and women. Because it's an archetype, it expresses differently depending on the vessel. In women, using emotional influence to control outcomes. Seduction as a tool for power. Identity built on external validation. Shadow feminine. Manipulation, envy, psychic vampirism. Y'all see, we dealt with that lesson about a couple days ago, the energy vampirism. That's a real thing. I told you when you hit this plateau, even when you're not on this plateau, you just may not be conscious of it. You're going to run across a bunch of them. You're going to run across a bunch of Jezebels, energy vampires. Men and women, like I said, it's not a female entity. Disconnection from authentic intuition. In men, addiction to being desired. Ego inflation through conquest or attention. Shadow masculine. Domination masked as charm. Emotional detachment paired with control. And that's a big one. Because I have dropped a video a while ago on my channel called Spiritual Detachment. Not in regards to emotional detachment. Paired with control. But it is time to detach. And in this instance, it is important to detach from that Jezebel spirit if it's up in you, please. Now, using charisma to destabilize others. In both cases, the core distortion is the same. Power without responsibility. Desire without alignment. Influence without integrity. The physiological effects of a Jezebel spirit. This is where it's going to get good because it actually manifests from the spiritual plane and it starts to manifest into how you are affected physically in regards to your health. Let's see how long-term health effects play in on this. This is where we stay grounded. There is no literal spirit invading the body. But people can experience the physiological consequences of the psychological patterns associated with this archetype. Physiological patterns. Heightened sympathetic nervous system activation. That's a key, that's a huge topic that could possibly be the triggering of anxiety attacks, etc. Huge topic. Matter of fact, that's going to be a huge thesis later on. Increased cortisol and adrenaline. Ain't that funny? Increased fight or flight, but more importantly, the increased cortisol. And you see ads left and right these days of showing how people need to defeat cortisol, how people aren't really big, they're just got cortisol in certain areas that make them seem fluffy, but they're not big. Is it cortisol or is it Jezebel? Or the physiological effects of having that psychological infliction upon your physiology? Shallow breathing. Tension in the solar plexus and sacral region. Sleep disruption. Emotional volatility. These are the same bodily responses seen in chronic stress, manipulative relationship dynamics, identity fragmentation, trauma bonding. The body interprets manipulation, whether giving or receiving, as threat. Wow. Whether giving or receiving, as threat. Metaphysical effects. The frequency corresponds to distortion in the lower chakras. Sacral chakra, desire, sexuality, and creativity. Desire becomes compulsive rather than creative, and sexual energy becomes transactional. The solar plexus, power, identity, will. Power becomes control. Identity becomes performative. Will becomes coercive instead of free. Throat chakra, truth, expression. Truth becomes weaponized. Communication becomes manipulative. In Hermetic terms, this archetype represents misalignment between desire, sacral, will, solar, and truth. Throat, desire, will, and truth. Sacral, solar, and throat. What planetary arcana is this associated with? Okay, so before we get deep into this, I'm gonna break this up a little bit because, like I said, in the next one of the future pages of this compendium, we are gonna deal with the archons. And so, I hear a lot of people talk about archons. Archons are the zodiacal associations of the planetary energies, and I'm actually show you where the archons are referenced. You can't say biblically, but as source material scripturally. I'm not sure if we all know, but a lot of people know, a lot of people don't. A lot of people think it's complete, a lot of people don't. It has been proven. You will never hear me say, you will never hear me as one of these people that's saying the Bible does not have truth in it or it was written wrong. It is incomplete. It's because books have been removed from it. And verses have been removed from it integrally. Integral verses. It is truth all up in it, all up through it. Physiologically and metaphysically. Spiritually, soulfully, physically. It is truth all up in, all up through it. It is just incomplete. To build upon that even further, two complete sources were found recently within the past century, known as, well, people are familiar with the Book of Enoch. Those are some lessons left out of the Bible. But you also are dealing with the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library. I don't play around. I don't play around. I'm dealing with the Nag Hammadi Library. And so, we're going to go into here. And this, I'm not doing it now. I just want y'all to understand the Nag Hammadi scriptures includes nearly 50 texts that were read as sacred literature and gathered in collections found near Nag Hammadi and elsewhere in Egypt. Hence the title of this volume. The texts published here, however, do not constitute scripture in the narrow sense of a closed canonical collection, as is the case with the Jewish scriptures, the New Testament or the Quran. Rather, the documents from the Nag Hammadi Library, the Berlin Gnostic Codex, and Codex Chacos are scriptural in the broader sense of text composed, read, translated, and copied as books recognized and inspired and inspiring for those seeking God. We're going to go up here. Since the discovery of ancient lost gospels, secret books, treaties, and tractates in the Nile Valley near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, the study of Gnostic religion and its impact on Christianity, Judaism, and Greco-Roman religions has been fundamentally transformed. Gnosticism's influence on Western. Neither here nor there. In the basis of this book, you're going to find a lot about your archon. So we're going to find out what archon is this planetary energy associated with. In Hermetic cosmology, the Jezebel archetype aligns most closely with the shadow aspect of Venus. Why Venus? So now you're talking about Libra and the Taurus. The negative aspects of the Libra and the Taurus. Venus governs desire, attraction, beauty, harmony, influence, social magnetism. Now let me tell you the importance. Just because I said it governs Venus and Taurus doesn't mean only Venus is Libras and Tauruses are affected by this quote-unquote spirit or quote-unquote psychology. Because my south node, my north node is Aries, but my south node is Libra, which is the association of the archon planetary of Venus, archon planet of Venus. So if I'm going in the wrong direction of my life purpose, it's associated with the Jezebel energy. If I go into the wrong direction of my life purpose, that's a Jezebel energy association. Everywhere. My bad, y'all. The Shadow of Venusian. No. Yeah, we did. The Shadow of Venusian archon expresses as seduction without love, charm without integrity, desire without alignment, manipulation through pleasure or validation. In Gnostic terms, this corresponds to the shadow of the planetary archon Hagith, the Venusian intelligence. But again, this is symbolic, not literal. The top 3 universal laws to neutralize this archetype. You already know it's always coming as mentalism, and surprisingly always vibration and correspondence. The first 3. This dissolves the illusion of external spiritual attack. When you recognize the archetype as a mental pattern, not an external demon, you reclaim sovereignty. From vibration, it is a frequency of insecurity, manipulation, egoic hunger. You raise your vibration through clarity, boundaries, self-worth, aligned desire. And through the law of correspondence, this is the key to integration. And I love this, as above, so below. Instead of fighting the archetype, you identify the internal wound or unmet need that resonates with it. I read somewhere, and this is always debatable and it's always researchable, but I read somewhere oftentimes people fall under the Jezebel spirit. As children, we all know through like essay, grape, and other schmexual misfortunes. But it could be something so simple as a child not receiving the amount of affection and love that they're supposed to receive. That can lead a child into insecure mentality where they're struggling with their self-worth, or giving a child too much affection and love. That can lead to an entitled, overprivileged child. So when the internal pattern is healed, the external manifestations vanish, the manipulative dynamics collapse, the frequency no longer matches your field. Transmutation. The Jezebel spirit is a distorted Venusian archetype representing misaligned desire and manipulative influence. It affects physiology through stress responses and affects metaphysics through distortions in the sacral, solar, and throat chakras. The antidote is not exorcism. It's alignment through mentalism, vibration, and correspondence. As usual,